I'm sorry, the lawyer said, eyes fixed on the pages my father had handed him. But this simply isn't valid. My father, Richard Ellis, wore a grin like he already owned the room. Then look again. 16 years had gone by since he abandoned me at 14 on Aunt Vivian's doorstep, with nothing but a single duffel bag. 16 years since he told everyone I was troubled, thankless, and too much trouble for any respectable parent to keep. Now he stood at the reading of Vivian's will in a sharp grey suit, drumming his fingers on the table like a customer annoyed with slow service. I hadn't laid eyes on him in years. The instant I entered, he scanned me head to toe and said, "You're late, Mara. Still can't help making a scene." The relatives lining the walls fell silent. I slipped off my black coat and took the seat across from him. That's when Mr. Calder, Vivian's attorney, reached over and turned the lock on the conference room door. My father's grin vanished. The room reeked of coffee, aged wood, and someone's overpriced cologne. Vivian would have despised it. She couldn't stand performed sorrow, murmuring relatives, or men who strode into a room assuming women would clear a path for them. But rooms like this were exactly where my father thrived. He stood near the head of the table next to my mother, Elaine, acting as though Vivian's estate was a meeting he himself had scheduled. My cousins wouldn't meet my gaze. An uncle I barely knew leaned toward his wife and murmured, "I didn't realize Mara would be here." Richard caught it and chuckled. "Of course she's here," he said. "Vivian always had a soft spot for theatrics." I kept my hands still in my lap. Mr. Calder glanced my way, then down at the sealed cream-coloured envelope in front of him. Vivian's handwriting marked the front. My name, written in deep blue ink. Next to it sat another folder, Original Ellis Family Records. My father caught me staring. "That woman filled your head with nonsense," he said. "But let's be honest about who she was. She was your aunt by marriage before she decided to play your mother." Elaine touched his arm. "Richard." "No," he said, raising his voice. "Everyone in this room remembers exactly why Mara was cut loose. She made our household unlivable. Vivian took her in because Vivian loved fixing broken things." A few eyes dropped to the table. I kept mine on Mr. Calder. His colour had drained. Richard gestured at the papers. "So let's move this along. Family wealth belongs with family. What did she leave me?" I leaned in. "You might want to sit down before you humiliate yourself." His eyes narrowed. "You don't get to talk to me that way in my own family." "This stopped being your family," I said, "the night you dropped me off on her porch and drove away." He took a step toward me. Before he could say another word, Mr. Calder rose, locked the door, and announced, "No one is leaving until I explain why Mr. Ellis's paperwork cannot possibly be genuine." The click of that lock sent me straight back to the night I first understood what being discarded truly meant. I was 14, standing in the rain outside Aunt Vivian's townhouse, a duffel bag at my feet and my backpack cutting into my shoulders. My father never even stepped out of the car. My mother stood next to me beneath a black umbrella, perfectly dry, like she'd been sent to drop off a parcel. "Mum," I said, clutching the soaked strap of my bag. "What did I do wrong?" Elaine wouldn't look at me. "Your aunt wanted the responsibility," she said. "Now it's hers." I asked one thing. From the driver's seat, Richard cracked the window just wide enough for his voice to carry. "You went digging through things that weren't yours." "It was Grandma's account," I said. "She left it for me. Why is it empty?" His jaw clenched. "Kids who snoop through adult business don't get adult protection." Then Aunt Vivian's front door swung open. She stood there in a silk robe, barefoot, hair piled messily on her head. Her gaze moved from me to my bags, to my mother. "Elaine," she said carefully, "why does Mara have every one of her documents with her?" My mother's mouth opened, then shut again. Vivian stepped out into the rain and lifted the backpack off my shoulders. Inside, my birth certificate, school files, insurance card, and a folded bank statement. Everything proving I belonged somewhere had been packed up like evidence for a trial. Vivian unfolded the statement beneath the porch light. Balance, 0. Just 3 days earlier, it had held my grandmother's savings. Behind us, my father's car pulled away before Vivian could reach it. That night she brewed me tea I couldn't stomach and made up the guest bed with fresh sheets. Her voice stayed gentle as she told me, "You don't have to leave this house unless you choose to." But past midnight, I woke to her voice out in the hallway. "Richard, you don't throw away a child for finding a number on a bank statement." His voice came through the phone, flat and cutting. "Stay out of my finances, Vivian, unless you'd like people digging into yours." The hallway went quiet. When she returned to the room, she wasn't angry. She was frightened. By morning, she'd already enrolled me in a new school, phoned a family lawyer, and told me to unpack everything. But I couldn't stop thinking about that call. If Vivian, wealthy, powerful, fearless, in every room I'd ever watched her walk into, could be reduced to whispering on a phone, what exactly did my father have on her? By the time I turned 18, Vivian had taught me how to hold my ground in rooms built to make me feel small. That night, the ballroom at the Whitmore Hotel sparkled with chandeliers, champagne, and donors who greeted Vivian like she was nobility. I stood at her side in a navy dress she'd picked out, clipboard in hand, helping run the charity gala she hosted every spring. Then my father walked in, uninvited. My mother clung to his arm. The chatter near the entrance died first, then spread table by table until even the string quartet seemed to hush. Richard kissed Elaine's cheek for the crowd, then threw his arms wide. "Vivian," he said warmly, "you didn't think we'd skip Mara's big night, did you?" Vivian's grip on her glass tightened. "You're not on the guest list." "Family doesn't need an invitation." He turned to the nearest donors, beaming like a devoted father. "Mara's really come along, hasn't she? Vivian's kindness worked wonders. Sometimes teenagers just need firm boundaries before gratitude sets in." The words hung over the room. Not abandoned, disciplined, not thrown away, corrected. I felt every face turn toward me. Before I could respond, Vivian moved to the microphone. "Since Richard's brought up Mara," she said, voice bright and steady, "I want everyone here to know she isn't just my legal ward. She's my intern, my right hand tonight, and the only honest Ellis I've ever met." A murmur rolled through the crowd. Richard's smile stiffened. Vivian pressed on. "And this year, our newest scholarship will bear the name of Mara's grandmother, because money set aside for a child should never disappear into an adult's pocket." Elaine's glass tipped, wine bleeding across her sleeve. Richard froze for 3 long seconds, then clapped once, slowly. How generous. Later, near the service corridor, I spotted him corner Vivian by a stack of empty trays. His voice was low, but I heard enough. "Keep hinting at theft," he said, "and donors might hear about that loan you signed." Vivian went rigid. He leaned closer. "Your signature, my name, bank records, you'd lose everything." I ducked behind the wall before he noticed me. That was the moment I realized his hold over her wasn't just shame. It was paper trails. After that night, I stopped hoping my parents would come around and started keeping records of my own. Emails, bank alerts, half-finished notes Vivian left lying around, any sentence that made her snap a folder shut too fast. When I finally asked what Richard had done, she only said, "Some truths need proof before anyone will believe them." I trusted her, until the night I found her by the fireplace in the study, crying, a stack of old loan notices beside her. She fed the first page to the flames. Before it curled black, I saw my father's signature burning at the bottom. Back in the conference room, Richard's composure had cracked. "Unlock this door," he told Mr. Calder. "Right now." Calder didn't budge. "This is no longer a routine will reading," he said. "What you submitted this morning creates a serious legal complication." Richard let out a short laugh. "A legal complication? Watch yourself. Accusing me in front of witnesses is defamation." Calder opened the folder with both hands. Vivian's official will was filed with this firm years ago, witnessed, notarized, and on record. There's nothing ambiguous about it. "Then read it," Richard snapped. "I intended to," Calder said, "until you showed up before the reading with a new codicil." The room stirred. A cousin whispered, "A new what?" "A codicil," Calder explained, "amends a will. This one claims Vivian handed over a substantial cash sum to Richard Ellis and gave him immediate access to her private records." My father lifted his chin. "Vivian changed her mind." "No," I said. Every head turned. I remembered her final weeks, the dim hospice room, the nurse logs by the door, the camera above the townhouse entrance, how badly her hands shook when I held her water glass for her. "She couldn't have signed anything 3 weeks before she died," I said. "She was unconscious." Elaine covered her mouth. Richard rounded on me. "You don't know what she did when you weren't around." I was the only one allowed to visit. Calder slid the sealed envelope toward me. "Mara, Vivian left this for you." My name looked back at me in her handwriting. I opened it carefully. Inside, a small brass key, a list of account numbers, and a single line. "When he comes for the papers, let him ask in front of witnesses." My pulse turned to ice. I set my phone on the table and hit record. Richard noticed the screen light up. "You pathetic girl," he spat. "She turned you against your own family." Elaine reached for me. "Mara, please, don't do this to your father." I stared at her hand until she withdrew it. "He did this to himself," I said, "the moment he forged a dead woman's signature." Someone gasped. Richard lunged for the folder. Calder's assistant stepped between him and the table, clutching the documents to her chest. "Mr. Ellis," Calder said sharply, "I've already reached the probate judge's clerk. This codicil lines up with irregularities in older financial records Vivian kept." My father's face went white. I pulled the brass key from the envelope. "I know exactly what this unlocks." Calder led us to the archive room beside his office. Silence followed as he opened the outer door. I turned the brass key in the second cabinet. Inside sat 6 labelled binders, a small fireproof pouch, and a letter in Vivian's handwriting. Calder pulled on gloves before touching any of it. The first binder read, "Grandmother's original account records." The second, "Richard Ellis, loan guarantee." The third, "Threats and correspondence." My father hovered behind me, breathing hard. "Those are private," he said. Calder looked at him over his glasses. "Not anymore." The truth unraveled page by page. At 14, I hadn't misunderstood a thing. My grandmother had set aside a savings account for my education, housing, and emergencies. Richard had drained it to cover payments on a failed business venture, and that was only the start. The loan paperwork listed Vivian as guarantor. Her signature sat on every page, except it wasn't hers. Calder placed her verified signature beside the loan guarantee. The difference was obvious even before he pointed it out. The wrong curve, the wrong spacing, the wrong pressure of the pen. Richard had forged Vivian's name, used my grandmother's money to cover his tracks, and cut me off the moment I discovered the empty account, before I could tell anyone else. Elaine collapsed into a chair. "No," she whispered. "Richard, tell them it isn't true." My father said nothing. That silence swallowed the room like a closing door. Calder opened Vivian's letter and read the section she'd flagged for witnesses. Richard threatened to accuse me of loan fraud if I exposed him without airtight proof. He also threatened to challenge Mara's custody, painting her in court as an unstable girl chasing money. So I chose to collect evidence until the truth could outlast him. My throat tightened, but I refused to cry. Vivian hadn't been fragile. She'd been quietly building a fortress of paper around me. Calder worked through the remaining files, bank statements, copied checks, old emails, phone records, handwriting analysis, nurse logs from Vivian's final weeks, and security footage proving Richard never visited on the date listed in his fake codicil. Then came the last piece. The forged codicil hadn't just demanded money. It granted him access to Vivian's private archive. He hadn't come for an inheritance. He'd come for the evidence. I turned to face him. For years, he'd existed in my memory as a locked door, a raised voice, a man in a driver's seat while I stood soaked in the rain. But now, with every lie laid bare in front of him, he looked smaller than I'd ever pictured. Elaine broke down further. "Richard," she begged, gripping her chair, "say something." He looked at the binders, then the lawyer, then me. Still nothing. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded sheet sealed in plastic, its edges browned from fire. Vivian had burned a stack of old loan notices years ago, but I'd kept one. I slid it across the table. I kept one too. For the first time, my father looked afraid of me. Calder closed the binder. Vivian's valid will leaves Richard and Elaine Ellis nothing. Mara Ellis inherits the townhouse, Vivian's shares, and full control of the scholarship foundation named for her grandmother. The forged codicil goes to probate court, along with all supporting records. Richard shot up. "You can't do this." Security opened the archive room door before he finished the sentence. He grabbed for the folder anyway. A guard caught his wrist and hauled him back. Papers scattered across the floor. My cousins watched him like they were seeing him clearly for the first time. Within the week, Vivian's statement reached every relative who'd once repeated my father's version of events. Within the month, donors learned the real reason behind the scholarship fund. His business partners stopped answering his calls. The probate filing set off investigations into forgery, elder financial abuse, and the old loan fraud he'd buried beneath my childhood. Elaine caught me alone in the hallway after the reading. "I was afraid," she said, mascara streaked under both eyes. "I did what your father told me to do." I looked at the woman who'd stood dry under an umbrella while I stood soaked in the rain. "Fear explains silence," I said. "It doesn't undo 16 years of letting people call me unstable to shield a thief." She reached for my hand. I stepped back. That was the last time either of my parents got close enough to touch me. Months later, I reopened Vivian's townhouse as headquarters for my grandmother's scholarship fund. The first award went to a 14-year-old girl fleeing an unsafe home, covering housing, tuition, counseling, and legal fees, because Vivian had taught me that survival needs structure, not just sympathy. I keep her sealed envelope framed above my desk, not as a scar, but as proof that truth can wait quietly for years and still arrive exactly when it's needed. The night my parents threw me away, they assumed I'd disappear. 16 years later, I was the one standing at the door while the law came to collect them.